Hello everyone, how's it going? Well, I wanted to do an update on the Dodge here and what's been going on, and a few personal things that I have to get out of the way first before we start this video. I hate to have to start it off like this, but I've got some terribly unfortunate news. My granddad, the previous owner of this truck, died on Christmas Eve of this last year. So it's been a tough time, and I'm gonna keep the truck in his memory and everything. And he just came down really bad with dementia, and slowly but surely progressed to the point to where he could no longer take care of himself, and we had to take care of him for a while. And he just continued to go downhill to the point to where he really just couldn't do anything. It's really sad to hear. I mean, to really talk about it, it's tough. But and he passed away in his sleep. Fortunately, he didn't go rough or anything. He just passed away one night in his sleep. So like I said, I'm still going to keep the truck, and it's not going anywhere. I've had a lot of people that want to buy it, and I just can't sell this truck. I really can't. Because he owned it, it means that much more to me, so I'm keeping it. And in the past 9 months or so, I've put about 10,000 miles on this truck. I've been using it literally every single day. And want to update on just a few things that I've done to it. It's not a whole lot, but I installed an electrical oil pressure gauge recently in the truck, and it is a glow shift white face 7-color gauge. That little button at the bottom right actually changes the colors of the gauge, and I'll show how I got it wired in. So right down by the oil pump, it's really hard to tell. It has like a pipe fitting that extends about maybe this far away from the oil pump, which points back towards the back of the truck. And as you can see, I have my new sending unit plugged in, and that pipe fitting is for the 1/8 inch MPT sending unit, for the real sending unit, because this truck came with an actual real pressure reading sending unit installed for the real gauge, because this truck didn't come with a factory idiot light. It came with a real gauge, but the gauge, especially gauges back then, weren't real responsive. So I wanted something that was a lot more responsive and would read pressure much quicker, when you tap the throttle. And as you can see, I've got a ground and a gauge wire coming from the sending unit. I've got it grounded right here at the cowl, right there. The other one goes across to the right there at that rubber grommet, and I believe that's the speedometer cable. And I just ran the wire, and it goes down under the dash and goes right to the gauge. Powered the gauge through the fuse box. One thing that I regret using an electrical gauge for this truck, though, is because of Dodge's issues with voltage at idle. I don't know about everyone else, but every Dodge that I've seen from this generation, back in the 80s, they had a problem where when you would come to a stop, the alternator just simply would not power the way they should. So that gauge will just go out sometimes at idle, and then it'll come back on when you accelerate from a stop. So that's the only issue I've had But I really like electrical gauges better than mechanical gauges, simply because I don't want to have to run tubing into the cab. And on top of that, I know those mechanical gauges are known for sticking over time. They get, gunk in them from the oil and stuff like that, and they get to where they stick and you have to tap on them. And I just didn't want to fool with that. I like electrical. So, a few little problems with the low voltage that this truck puts off, it's not a big deal. Upon installation of this gauge, I started to realize that this truck has a little bit low pressure at hot idle. I was getting about 8 pounds at hot idle in drive, and it needs more than that. So I've come to realize that over time, from research and everything, that the Slant 6 was known for problems with the oil pumps and the little suction tubes on the sump. They'll suck air and this and that. But I don't want to go through the trouble of pulling the pan to check that. So I went back with a new oil pump, which is a Melling M-66C part number. And the pressure's up a little bit, but the only difference that it really made was it has much higher pressure now going down the road than it did on the original pump. The original pump topped out at about 35 psi, give or take, going down the road, and you really couldn't get it any higher than that. Now this one goes up to almost 50 psi going down the road, going down the highway really. Going down just, cruising at about 50, I run about 42 to 43 pounds. When I come to a stop, it's about 8 to 9 pounds, so it's not great oil pressure. I thought it should be more than that. But apparently, it seems to run okay. I don't think the main bearings are worn out or anything, because this truck's only got 67,000 miles on it. And it's been driven like it's been babied its entire life. My granddad has owned this truck since, not brand new, but since it had 13,000 miles on it. It's had oil changes every, 2 to 3,000 miles max. And I've also been doing oil changes every 3,000 miles. I sent in an oil sample after an interval to Blackstone for analysis, and it came back with really good wear numbers. Low bearing metal, low lead. That's all from bearings. Copper, lead. That comes from rod bearings. The aluminum was good. That comes from the pistons, and maybe might even be the surface that the camshaft rides on. Also had good iron numbers. That comes from your crankshaft and your camshaft. And these flat tappet motors have a little bit higher iron readings anyway, but they showed me the average for a Slant 6, and this one's actually wearing way better than most. So this engine's really in good shape. It runs great. I don't know much about these engines, but everyone I talk to says you can't kill them. I have seen a few of them in junkyards that had thrown rods. Now, it could be any reason why they threw a rod. It could be that someone abused it, over revving. That can happen to any engine. So currently I'm running 15W40, and Chrysler has a I think 8 psi minimum at hot idle for this truck, which I have. It has about 8 and maybe 9 psi in drive at idle. When I put it in park, I get about 13 because it idles up to about 900 RPM. And at 2000, the spec is 30 psi to 70 psi, and I get about 42 to 43 psi at 2000. So everything, seems to be in specs. I don't have any reason to believe that there's something wrong with this engine, because it just runs too good. And I also replaced the spark plugs and the wires. It runs a lot better from that. Also replaced the distributor cap and rotor. Also replace the fuel filter, things like that. The thing that I still need to get to is the transmission fluid. The transmission fluid is still in there from like 1991. When the starter was engaging wrong on this truck, it ruined the flywheel, or at least my granddad had told me at one time, and so he had to replace the starter along with the flywheel, and the torque converter went with it and all that. But yeah, everything is working good though on this truck. I mean, it's just, I just got to service it and make sure that it has everything it needs, because the fluid is still clean. Let's see. If you look right here, you can see the transmission fluid. It's hard to get the camera to focus on this, but the fluid is a nice bright red color, so I don't see any issues there. Transmission doesn't slip, shifts good, things like that, so I don't have anything to suspect a trans problem. It just needs to change the fluid and filter. Also changed the antifreeze, and did that a couple of months ago. Nice green color now. I had to completely flush it because it was turning brown and rusty. Just looked like block dust in there. It was real brown looking. And also had to clean out the reservoir bottle, and it's still got a little bit of stuff in it, but nothing like it had. It was just brown mud in there. But yeah, everything is, just slowly but surely getting it, getting everything maintenanced and getting the fluids changed and this and that. I still got to get these vacuum hoses changed out, because I suspect that one of them has a leak in them or something. Because when the truck idles, it's kind of got just a little bit of a rough idle, like kind of misfires a little bit. It always has, but I just suspect that one of them's probably leaking. I mean, these vacuum hoses have been on here since probably the truck was new, so it wouldn't be out of the question for one of them to crack. So I just want to go ahead and replace them to rule out whether or not it's got a vacuum leak. Or maybe it's just a slight carburetor issue from so many years of use, and plus this truck sat for a while, so who knows, it may be gummed up in the bowl and whatnot, and it just kind of makes it run a little rough at idle, but it runs great going down the road. I can tell you one thing about this truck though: it does not knock, runs great, and it's just a fantastic truck. And I still want to upgrade this carburetor. If I can find me a Super 6 intake, that's what I want. Right now this truck's only got the standard 1-barrel Holley 1945, as I explained in my last update video, and I want to get rid of that and just completely eliminate the 1-barrel and go with a 2-barrel with a bigger intake manifold. And I want to say, people have told me that the 2-barrel intake manifold is a bigger diameter than the 1-barrel, like what this one has. So, and I really could see that, because this one does look smaller. But like I said, I'm no expert on slant 6s, so I'm just learning a little bit, day by day as I go along and do more research. But I mean, the carburetor that's on it now does a good job. It's just, this truck just doesn't have enough power for me though. I mean, now I've ran it down the highway recently, and you can go 80 miles an hour and not be running it hard. I mean, it'll run down the highway like any other vehicle. But it just takes a while to get there. And with the combination of the 323 gear ratio in the rear end, and then automatic transmission, it just really lugs this thing down, and plus the emissions, smog control and bullshit, and it just kills this thing on the power. A small issue electrically that I've had with the truck lately is when I go to start it, this switch, this safety switch in the gear shifter, is going bad, and sometimes it's almost like the truck doesn't want to turn over, even though I know the battery has got plenty of power. But I can jiggle that shifter around a little bit, and put it down in neutral or something and get it to make contact, and then starter spins over fine. But sometimes I come out of here and I hit the starter and it's just it just barely turns over. So let's take the truck for a drive real quick and let's watch the gauge. And the truck is not cold right now. I just drove it a few hours ago. And the gauge is not flickering, that's just the camera. But as you can see, we're making about 48 pounds of pressure right now. So that's not too bad. Alright, pulling out onto the road. It's almost to operating temp. Coolant wise, but the oil's still got a ways to warm up. As you can see, it makes pretty good pressure. Now it will come down a little bit, like I said, but it always stays pretty good. The only time that it seems low to me is like when you come to an idle, and but other than that, it doesn't really ever seem to be a problem. Now I've talked to people, and people say that, 8 pounds at idle, 8 to 10 is considered normal for a Slant 6. But I can't imagine like if this truck had an idiot light, 8 pounds wouldn't be far away from setting the low oil pressure light off. So, I don't know, maybe it is normal. Most people seem to think so. And I wouldn't doubt that it is, as good as this truck runs and as good of care that it's had. Because this truck has been cared for. My granddad always made sure this truck had what it needed. Okay, and now we're going to get some speed up. And gonna get up to about 50, and at 50 this engine turns right at about, I'd say, 2,000 RPM. The speedometer is off quite a bit, so there's 50 right there. And at 2,000, Chrysler says 30 to 70 psi is the spec, and that's a pretty wide spec, but there you go, about 45 give or take is what I'm getting at 2,000. So I'm pretty much in the normal, in the middle on that specification, and I'm not gonna worry about it. Because that's really and truthfully, that is way too much pressure to worry about it. Because That's about as good as it gets, really. And 45 is enough pressure for just about any speed. I mean, you know, 45 pounds is enough for 4,000 RPM, easy. And I'm only turning half that, so everything seems to be good. The truck runs good, and other than simply lacking power, as most vehicles did it back in the 80s, I don't have anything to complain about. The truck runs fantastic. Alright, so after about a 15-mile drive, and it is scorching hot today. It's about 95 degrees and probably 90% humidity. That's about what I get in park. It's idling at about 800 at maximum, and it gets about 12 pounds, give or take, and which is within Chrysler specification. So I just keep a watch on it, and you know, if it were to get worse, you know, if it were to become a problem, I could always pull the oil pan off and check the sump, and maybe even replace a sump tube if I had to, but only if I have to. That's a worst case scenario, you know, and I'm not going to do it until it's absolutely necessary. So but the truck runs great, other than a small lifter tap on one lifter. It's got just a little tick 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 tick, but other than that, the truck runs great. And the odometer is off. It says 62 or 63 268, but I've got about 67,000. Last time I calculated this, I have about 67,500 right now on this truck. And but yeah, my granddad, he loved this truck. You know, he always had a lot of faith in it, and I do too. I've drove this truck from Birmingham to Atlanta, and several times actually, and never had any issues with it. Running 75, 80 miles an hour, and it's just, this truck just cruises. So I tell you one thing, they don't make them like this anymore. But thanks everyone for watching, and I'm really hoping that I can get that Super 6 intake on this thing sometime in the near future. That is that's a big thing for me, is to try and at least bump up the power a little bit and add in a straight pipe with this thing too. Would really make a difference. But thanks again for watching, guys, and I'll see you next time.